Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Andrew Hone, and I'm the president and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance, Greater Portland's Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us for our September video forum. And everyone here at the Alliance truly wishes you well, while our brave firefighters and first responders battle the blazes across the West. We hope that you and your families are safe, and please be cautious as air quality for the Greater Portland region is still hazardous if you can't tell by looking outside of your window. So please stay inside when you can. Also, while our region continues to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic, we encourage everyone to practice physical distancing and help all of us contain this pandemic by wearing a mask. It's really straightforward. Wear the mask. During this COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to work diligently in being a resource to our community. Our website is updated frequently. In fact, there it is. That was how quickly we updated it. Just appeared on your screens. And of course, follow us on social media for updates. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and elsewhere. A recording of this presentation and links for our resources mentioned will be available on our website shortly after we wrap up this morning. And of course, none of these events could happen without the support of our members. Thank you. We have an incredible list of sponsors, and I want to thank them today, KeyBank and the Portland Tribune. Mark Garber, who is with us from the Portland Tribune, thank you so much again for your support and for being with us this morning.
Well, I'll go ahead. So first, I want to acknowledge the stress that everyone's been under this past week, which of course comes on top of the pressure that we've all been feeling due to the pandemic and the economic shutdown. Now with the wildfires and the horrendous environmental conditions, it's just one crisis on top of another. So I hope everyone, as Andrew said, I hope everyone's staying safe, taking care of themselves, their families during these extraordinary times. For us at the Pamplin Media Group, our reporters and photographers and editors have been covering the wildfire story nonstop for a week. They are seeing a lot of heartbreak and devastation. Some of the worst any of us has experienced as journalists. And of course, we don't just cover our communities, but we're part of them. So some of our employees even had to evacuate their own homes while doing their jobs. I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences this past week. So again, I just want to extend my best wishes and concern to all of you. I really appreciate that the PBA has continued these forums during the pandemic. It's been an important way for all of us as businesses to stay connected. I'm grateful to be able to listen to the panel today as they discuss the topic of Black prosperity for our region. We're big believers in the power of economic opportunity to fully realize an equitable society. One of our publications to that point is called Opportunity Magazine, and it's focused on that intersection between entrepreneurship and equity. We partner on the magazine with the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs. And I mentioned it in particular today because the next edition is coming out next week. So please watch our Business Tribune website for the coming edition of Opportunity Magazine. And again, we are honored to help sponsor today's event with this exceptional panel.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. And of course, apologies to all of our viewers and to Michelle as well. The message was our speakers were off. So that just shows you it is too early. We have not had enough coffee this morning. So Michelle, you were completely audible and perfectly fine. That was on us. So back to you again. Thank you for your support and thanks for being with us and working through our own common sense technical issues here at HQ. So the floor is yours, Michelle.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew, and good morning. I hope you get that second cup of coffee here soon. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Weisenbach. I'm the president of KeyBank here in Oregon and Southwest Washington, and as a longtime sponsor of this forum, I know I speak on behalf of all of Key when I thank you all for being here today for this important conversation. You know, in the years that I've spent focusing on the larger issues of diversity and equity and inclusion, I can honestly say I haven't seen anything like the times that we're in right now. But the difference is the energy and attention that feels very distinctive in our communities today. One of the things that I think that we need to continue to do is to really focus and support the honest and transparent dialogue, ones like we're having this morning, and to really create those spaces for people to share their perspective, experiences, and ideas. Forums like the one that we're holding today are a really key component to moving the conversation forward. We can't have a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion without also talking about access and opportunity in the neighborhoods where we work and live. KeyBank shares this focus. We help communities thrive. That's our purpose. And building stable neighborhoods is more critical today than ever. We are proud to be standing with the business and families of Oregon and Southwest Washington as we deal with a number of crises, our wildfires and air quality, just one of many. And we include in those critical issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're discussing today that affects all of us at all levels. Focused conversations on the actions that we need to take to advance Black economic prosperity are the springboard for change in our communities and in our country. So we want to thank you, Portland Business Alliance, for offering this opportunity for this dialogue today, and to all of you for joining us in the conversation and being part of the change. So thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the time this morning.
It's great to see you, Michelle, virtually, and then one day, hopefully in person. So thanks for being with us. Again, thanks to both of our sponsors. And we are joined today by a really special group of individuals that I'm very excited to hear from. And I know, like me, many of you will have questions for them. So please share your questions in the Q&A tool, not in the chat function, but in the Q&A tool at the bottom of your Zoom window. The only questions we'll be reviewing are the ones that you enter into that function. So please make sure to use that. While you do so, include your full name, your organization, and the location of your business so we know where you're connecting from. And if you have a comment, you can share it with everybody in the comment section and in the chat function. So we have a remarkable panel today, as mentioned, and I'm excited to introduce our moderator for today's event, J.R. Lilly of the East Portland Action Plan, an advocate for the city of Portland. J.R., it's really good to see you this morning. Thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel. Again, thanks to all of our panelists.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. Yat e bene. Want to thank everyone for joining us today for discussing a very important topic, something that we all can learn and glean something from today. We have a wonderful group of individuals at our panel today, and we're going to start introducing them now. So please help me welcome Callie Thorne-Ladd, the Executive Director of Kairos PDX, Michelle DePass, President and CEO of Meyer Memorial Trust, Mari Watanabe, the Executive Director of Partners in Diversity, and Alondra Simpson, CEO of CORE. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you guys join us today. All righty. We are going to just jump right in and get the questions. I'm going to ask the first question, and let's get started. Let's start by exploring the question, how did we get here? For many Oregonians, they see the protest movement of 2020 as a reaction to a series of recent killings of Black citizens while in police custody. But the reality is this has been building for decades. From your perspective, what led to the largest movement of economic and social justice for Black Americans since the civil rights movement? And we're going to ask Callie to lead us off.
Yeah, so it's a big question. When I thought about this question, I thought about the fact that, we have a country that was built off of the dehumanization of others, starting with Indigenous people, and it carries through within the blood and veins of this country. And I think we stopped noticing what the long-term impacts of dehumanization are. And we live and breathe them every day, but the pandemic created the space for us to stop. And the video capture, there have been so many deaths of Black people at the hands of police from the beginning of the police existing. And, the genesis of policing was a tactic and tool used to keep Black people enslaved. And so the killings aren't new, but the fact that the pandemic stopped us in our tracks, and then we had a video that called upon our moral compass to see dehumanization in action, I think it forced all of us to deal with and grapple with the discomfort of when we forget Ubuntu, we forget the interconnectedness of each of us, then we are lesser than. And I think people have been waiting to act, and we have the space now to do so.
Wonderful. That was greatly stated. Michelle, would you have to add on to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with Kelly as she brings us to our history and to bring us a little closer into sort of history that our parents and loved ones actually lived. Of course, here in Oregon, as it was actually stood up as a part of this country that didn't allow Black people in, whether they were enslaved or free. And after that, you had many establishment moments to establish policy and practice. And that policy and practice was, of course, going to be established in a discriminatory way. Our culture and in our veins, as Kelly spoke about, was still discrimination, was still not wanting Black people to be in our midst. So we grappled with it through years and years of displacement, redlining, urban renewal, all of the many policies that we have come to understand, but really making sure that we get the context of how it's applied is why we're here today, because the application has actually left Black people and other people of color in a space where we have not been able to achieve and not been able to be afforded all of the different social, political, and economic progress realities that the people that are part of Portland as it was established as a white utopia are lucky enough to be able to have.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to invite Mari to share with us next.
Hi, everybody. So my panelists have said everything so eloquently. I do think it was just like a perfect storm with us being in a lockdown and everybody watching TV. Because yes, this information, these happenings aren't new. They've been happening for decades and hundreds of years. So, and we often hear when somebody gets shot, it's like, oh, I was self-defense or something like that. But this time, and we were all watching our TVs, nothing else to do. And so we were watching a man be murdered with a police officer's knee on his neck. So I think that really just got us all up and wanting to get off our sofa and do something, and just getting sick and tired of seeing these same images on our TV set. So just to add a little bit to what our others have said. So we really have to understand our history in order to be able to move forward. So I hope we are, and I'm hoping this is different. I feel it's different now.
Thank you, Mari. Alonda, would you like to add on to what our other panelists have shared?
Sorry about that. I forgot. I was responsible for unmuting myself. Thanks for all those to tee us off, ladies. Much appreciated, as I'm the minority here as it relates to gender, but you know, it's all right. I'll hold my own. First and foremost, I would have to say that this has been building for centuries. And it's not been decades, it's been centuries. And what's even more intriguing in this light is that this is, I think, what we're seeing now due to our advancement of technology and social media is I guess I'll speak in my industry term, the waste, the trash that we've consumed back in May on the TV screen is something that's just being brought to light. And we're only going to probably see more and more of it, unfortunately, because we are asking for justice in an unjust system. It was never designed to have justice, and so I think understanding that from the forefront will enable us to be able to start thinking broader and bigger about how it is we change the course that our country is its trajectory is on right now. But I would say just to get back to the question, blatant racism and bigotry is essentially what's gotten us here. And I wouldn't just say it's by white groups, it's by almost all ethnic groups towards Blacks. And what's even worse, because I'm gonna just be direct in this narrative, and as we're having this open conversation today, is that, you know, Blacks actually also engage in these forms of discrimination against ourselves too, just as a result of indoctrination. And so we haven't even gotten to a place as a community where we see each other and we love each other. And that's an important step in order for us to move forward as a group, as a community, as a population in this country, in this day and time. The other thing is that, you know, all disadvantaged groups, and it's funny that you brought up the question around civil rights, but all disadvantaged groups, except for Blacks, since the 1960s, have used civil rights policies and programs to further suppress Black people from economic mobility. And really, when you think about how the programs have come into play around, you know, service and contracting and government spending, there have been so many different groups that have been added to a movement that was instilled by our, you know, leaders in the 1960s, our Black leaders in the 1960s, that was mainly designed to uplift and support people that look like us on this panel. It didn't play itself out. There's one group, and I don't want to waste too much energy on it, but there's one group that has benefited the most ever since civil rights, and it's not Black people. And it's a little alarming and concerning, but it's something that we definitely have to pay attention to. Lastly, and more importantly, back to the conversation around Black prosperity and Black unity. The Black community has not developed an economic resilience and prosperity agenda for future generations. And I think that is going to be the most important piece before we fix anything in this society or in this system that, as I mentioned earlier, is unjust, in order for us to get down to an avenue of justice and outcomes that are going to benefit future generations that don't exist yet.
Wonderful. Well said to all of our panelists. I mean, that was a great starting point for all of us. I know I have a lot of questions, so if anyone watching has questions, make sure you add that in the Q&A. We're going to go into our next question, and to kind of add on into what our conversation here. Each of you is a leader in building and announcing a new initiative aimed to enact new policies and targeting new resources that will accelerate economic development for Black Oregonians. Please tell us about what you are leading and how our community can support your efforts. Let's start with Michelle, and then we'll go to Callie.
Good morning. Again, it's like a multiplication of a wealth of information today. So I want to just take my couple minutes to first take a step back to be able to underscore that we know that Oregon needs Meyer Memorial Trust and our resources to be able to focus on the most important issues of the day. There have been a lot of important issues I have to underscore. And you know, this weekend, in grappling with the wildfires and the devastation, we know that we have to step up, and we do. And this effort that I'm going to actually discuss for a moment is just one of the ways that we ensure that we are here for our community. During the immediate moments after all of these murders of Black people were coming across our screens in many ways, it was very clear to us that we had to be able to develop a focused issue area, a focused response to these killings. We've already discussed that this is not the first time. It's been happening daily around our country. But Portland really has been standing up to be able to say, not anymore, no way. So we needed to do our part. We're well positioned. So we have stood up Justice Oregon for Black Lives. It is a $25 million initiative. It's the largest initiative to date that Meyer Memorial Trust has committed resources to. And it is a commitment to Black people, Black organizations and serving institutions, Black ideas, Black opportunity. And so we see that we have an opportunity to partner with communities, people, individuals and families, organizations, and the business community. On Monday, we posted a job description, which I want to direct everyone to. They can find it on our website at mmt.org. And we are looking for a director to lead this initiative. We hope to be able to get someone on board very soon. Through this initiative, we are looking to the future of Oregon. This is not going to be a one and done opportunity. We know that this is going to take some time. We acknowledge what's in the DNA of Oregon, and we will be looking to be able to support systemic change and opportunities. These systemic change and opportunities obviously start with the people that have been thinking about this and how to do this for quite some time. So when we announced this effort, we made a series of first run grants to institutions within Oregon that have been working on these issues, not only to be able to support Black people and Black vision, but also specifically in areas that we know we have to move forward, such as education policy and how you're actually going to get every Black young person educated and graduated from high school. So there's a world of opportunity that we'll be looking to, and I will end there because I know I've taken my time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful news to hear. Can't wait to see where that goes. Callie, same question for you.
Yeah, so this one is a tough one. I was listening to a podcast by Baratunde this morning, and he was interviewing an activist, Valerie Carr. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her last name right, but she wrote a book that is really good, but she talks about how we've moved past resistance into reimagining, and that we're in this space, and she talked about when Trump first was elected, there was this feeling of resistance, and activists on the ground were saying, no more, no more. But that the power dynamic and resistance still keeps the people who have been in power, and you're resisting their power. Reimagining shifts the power structure, and that we are at a place in society where we're reimagining. And what's really neat, as Kairos, was founded, I'm one of the co-founders, with this idea that we need to reimagine education, that the way that children are learning and the space that they inhabit in schools has never been about them, particularly Black children. But we serve Black and Brown and many children of color, 73%, but that it never has been for them. And if we are going to see a change in the system, we have to begin to remake that change. And Kairos is most known for the school that we run, but we've actually always done a lot of policy and advocacy work. And so a couple things I want to highlight, because I think we are in this really exciting time of reimagining that is purposeful, intentional, accountable. The Reimagine Oregon project, I'm actually part of a collective of people, so I'm not in any way the sole leader. I have been a voice, particularly in the education space around Reimagine Oregon, which is really focused on our government officials at the local level up to the governor. And we've actually had federal Congress folks involved as well. How do we reimagine what Oregon looks like in a way that better serves Black people? And what does that mean from a policy and legal standpoint? And so it's exciting because we have brought people to the table with a clear mission, clear indicators, clear data, and we are working diligently to continue to revisit. Here are the things, like on the education side, we have created a system that has created a pipeline to prison for Black children, starting as early as preschool, where we identify Black boys disproportionately as being behaviorally challenged based on subjective things. That can't be tolerated any longer. And we can keep talking about an achievement gap, but it is nothing new, and it exists by design. And so in this Reimagine effort, we're getting to some of the root problems to be able to shift that. And then the other effort that I would highlight is Preschool for All. Let's reimagine what early childhood looks like in our society. And the fact that we do not have quality early learning accessible to all children, and that Black and brown children are disproportionately impacted in that way, knowing how important the neuroscience and the research tells us very clearly that the early years are the foundation for everything else. So when we deny children that access, we are setting them up to fail, and it is unacceptable. And so there is a measure that will be on the ballot in November, specific around Preschool for All, that this was a ballot measure that came about not because white people felt bad and wanted to do something, but because Black, Indigenous, and brown people came together and said, we want more. And we had a number of community-based organizations coming together to say, here is what a system looks like, where we actually prioritize people of color, children of color, and low-income kids to ensure that they have access to the quality preschool they deserve. So those are a couple of the things, but there is so much more happening right now. And I think there's an opportunity for people, if they really care about change, to stop talking about what's wrong, to stop giving into fear, and to put on their gloves and begin to reimagine a world that is possible. That is what everyone before us has done in terms of the great leaders, and is what it is time for us to do.
Wonderful. That was really well said. If I could ask a follow-up question and to add on to, like, how, in addition, what are some things that we can do as a community to kind of support some of these efforts?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about just the role of business. The same markers that, you know, we're looking at markers of change in government. You could create markers of change in business. And I think it calls the question, why aren't there more markers of change? And I think it's things that Orlando and Andrew Coles and others within PBA I know are working on, but we need to have a level of, business has to have a level of accountability. I think business, you know, there was an article in the New York Times that talked about Friedman's work and how business is only for profit. And yet a lot of businesses have challenged that notion, and this idea that there is a balance of moral purpose with high performance leading to higher profit. So what if profits were invested in a way that actually tended towards social good, that invested, you know, resource into social good? Like, we need to, again, the reimagining requires us to do things differently, not as we've always done it. And I think part of what business can do is be a participant in the reimagining of this work. And then, of course, voting and supporting the ballot measures.
Yes, thank you very much. A wonderful, again, everything is amazing that we have heard before. Orlando, same question to you.
I was just loving her passion, and she made me start thinking and writing right there. So I forgot I was even on the panel for a little bit here. But yeah, and I just want to piggyback on the reimagine term, because I feel like sometimes people are in this place where they want to, like, kind of focus back on getting back to normal. And I don't think people have really digested the reality that there will never be a normal again. And when you sit and think about that, you're going to have to start reimagining, what is this place going to look like that is going to get us to shared prosperity. And I just want to thank Kali for all the work that she's doing and the efforts that she's been putting forward in her leadership on really, just most importantly, the utilization and the importance of that specific term as not only as it means for the Black community, but as it pertains to the entire ecosystem that we share here, because we're going to have to reimagine what our new world is going to look like. But just to kind of jump in on your question, fellow board members and I have been working on an initiative which has been an extension from the call to action that was titled The Invisible Knee, that was released back in June. And if no one has seen that yet, I'm sure someone can share a link here in the chat area, but it's on the PBA website. And that was really just a reaction to what was taking place back then, with the graphic images that were being, you know, just overly displayed on the TV screens, which is, I think, affected every single human being emotionally. And I was personally emotionally impacted to the extent where I felt like it was a little, it didn't do anything positive for me to continue to have a TV on. And so as a reaction, getting all the board members together, having these conversations, you know, jumping on the phone with Andrew Hone and just saying, hey, you know, we have to do something here because the reality is the economic circumstances in which Black people face. And when you think about it, it comes back. I mean, he was being arrested for fake $20 bill. So the reality is the unfortunate conditions that Blacks are in economically are leading to these drastic circumstances we're seeing today. And it's not just from the images of knees on necks or police brutality and police murdering Black people. There's all other elements within this society that are not being spoken about that tie back to this metaphor, which we've referred to as the invisible knee, because the knee is never gone. It's there in all different avenues. And really it starts with our youth. It starts with education. So I think, you know, the things that Cali is doing and Kairos are doing are really important, as it provides a conduit to building that trust and confidence and just that positive outlook for our next generation within an educational institution, somewhere where they feel free and safe, and that's going to be really important. But this initiative that I was referring to is called the Black Economic Prosperity Agenda, and really it's standing up against the economic inequities and disparities in our region. And personally, if you would want to compare it to something, I would say it would work almost similar to the City of Portland's Climate Action Plan. That was a long-term plan that had a goal around how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions over a long period of time, and that was an environmental sustainability agenda. This is an approach to really look at, you know, one of the three-legged stools of sustainability around the economic injustices and disparities and negative trajectory in which we're on as it relates to human capital, and the human capital that is concentrated in the Black community that tends to get neglected daily. The only difference here, I would say, is that there would be a more of a concerted effort to monitor these metrics and these data points to ensure that we can actually see progress and really hold our electeds accountable and our public agencies accountable, because I think it starts there. It starts with the referees. The referees need to make sure that they're refereeing the game to ensure that it's fair, not that it's actually benefiting one group over another. And so the only way you actually can measure fairness or equity is finding a way to support and put a hand out to those that are the most vulnerable. And I think that's got to be the number one piece and where we start with all this. So to tie into that, I would call them equitable economic policies, are the final pieces that we need really for our region. This is what will make the Portland Metro region a global leader in sustainability. I think environmentally, we've done a really good job. Socially, economically, they're almost one and the same to a certain extent. And I think that those are areas that we're gonna have to work on substantially. And I think as long as we have a strategy that can move us forward in those areas, we should be able to actually see the pendulum swing in the future. It's not gonna happen immediately, but it will be in the future. When you do anything that's led with human prosperity and investing in human capital, you're always going to win in the end. And I'm learning that as a business owner, just doing it with our own workforce and our employees, making sure that we put them at the forefront over anything else actually leads to long-term financial gain for our organization. So those are a couple of the main things. And I think as we get deeper and deeper into these conversations around policies and regulations as it pertains to the most vulnerable groups in our communities, i.e. Black people, we will find out how much Black lives really matter, especially when policy language starts to get developed. And I think that is a wall we have not come to meet yet as a community. There are invisible needs all over the place. And so I think once it starts to play itself out in policy language, that is when we'll decide whether or not if we truly want to be a sustainable ecosystem we're aspiring to be.
Wonderful. Wonderfully said. I wonder if you're up for answering, being the first to answer the next question, because you touched on it, and it's would just love you to expand on it. So the next question for everyone is, how should the Portland region and the state of Oregon measure progress on Black economic advancement and hold the entire community and region, elected official, policymakers, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, accountable to making progress?
You wanted me to kick that off, right? Great. Yeah. So, so just to jump straight in, we are going to be developing and looking at ways to try to incorporate an equitable economic dashboard. As we all know, Blacks are in the last place of every category of society. And all this directly ties to the overall well-being of the Black community. It's health indicator. It's health and wellness. And in today's terms, the Black community is synonymous of a hospital patient that has, 3 to 4 health conditions, has got COVID-19, and I'll throw another element on it. The window in the hospital room has got a crack in it. And right now in today's conditions, there's wildfire smoke seeping into the room. So right now it is code red that we are dealing with right now within this particular group in this community. It's funny sometimes when everyone talks about prosperity and equity, and everybody gets excited and everybody wants to do something about it and everybody feels good, and it's very feel-good terminology. But I just want to be very clear and frank that Black does not mean minorities. Black does not mean people of color. Black does not mean diverse populations. Black does not mean underserved communities. Black means Black, unapologetically. And I think once we accept that is the narrative and that is the message, and it's not just us here on this panel, it's everybody in society, that's when we can start moving forward. It's almost to the extent of like, everyone would be happy and supportive if I were to say, hey, we're going to set a plan to double the wealth of Blacks, yay, great, cheering. That's like the exciting piece, right? And then if I were to say, well, now, we're going to do that within 5 to 10 years. Now that becomes like soft clapping, like, okay, that sounds good. And then if I say, guess what? 75% of our public spending will go to majority Black-owned firms. And private companies could also offset this approach if it makes people too uncomfortable. But if I were to just say 75% of public money will go directly to Black-owned firms, everybody would stop and go, whoa, that's uncomfortable. That's the invisible need. And so that is really what racism is. And so once we figure out how we're going to create a system and model that's going to support outcomes that actually shifts the MFIs of Blacks, and again, this is about humanity. These are about human beings. This is not just about one particular group. I'm just looking specifically at the group that has obviously been impacted the most as a result of economic gains within this particular country and around the world. But as it relates to the most vulnerable, we know that if that became a policy, the judicial system would fight that. Now think about how unfair and how racist that is. When you actually just think about it, there would be groups that would say, well, that's discrimination. Of course it is. It's intentionally discriminating against others because you have to do that in order to help the most vulnerable group. It's favoritism. But until everybody can get to the place where they actually believe that and support that concept, we're not ever going to be able to move forward. We're going to be talking about these same issues in the future, and my children will be talking about them, but I do not want to create a platform for them to talk about them. I want to create a platform for the next generation to actually lead with them and make sure that there aren't any communities left behind, and skin color or culture or ethnic background or values should not dictate whether or not if somebody is a winner or a loser in this country.
Thank you so much. I'm going to invite Mari to share next and then Callie.
I was afraid you were going to call me next. It's going to be hard to go after Orlando. Thanks, Orlando, for all your comments. Looking at this question, there's a lot of things. Like when you talk about doing policy work and passing laws and things, what I've learned over the years is just it's easy to pass a law, and it all sounds good, and everybody goes to Salem and watches the signing and claps. And I think the hard part is actually implementing the laws that help benefit our communities. And I've seen that in action a lot, where law gets passed, but then it doesn't get funded, or it gets only partially funded, so we can't complete the project or get it embedded. And so we end up just continually to be where we were before the law got passed. So I think for elected officials and policymakers, this is really an important part, is that, just passing a law is not good enough. It's really about how you implement it, and then measuring it to make sure that it is helping the communities that it's intended to help. And I think for businesses, it's like setting goals and metrics is a must-have for them to know if they are actually being able to move the needle of things. And Orlando already spoke to this, but even the state, it's like right now, if you were to ask the state, like how many Black businesses are there in the state and how many dollars are actually going to those Black businesses, they cannot answer that question. So in order to measure, we need to have good data. And right now, I don't believe we can get that data. And I'm going to take a moment to throw the PBA under the bus and say we, as members, can't even really tell you how many Black-owned businesses there are in the PBA's membership. So we have work to do on that end to be able to, again, have a starting point where we can see where we're at and then be able to start to move policies and, to measure so we can really see where we're going.
Callie?
Well, I really appreciate Mari mentioning the accountability at the state level. I was actually talking with the state superintendent of public schools earlier this morning about this very thing. Across the state, we don't have any contracting guidelines or metrics or really any accountability for ensuring that Black-owned or any person of color owned business is getting contracts. A lot of contracts already exist within this DAS system, and they are not representative of the community, nor is there any accountability that people are acting in a racially responsible way. So you could have a contract and be detrimental to the lives of Black people, and there is nothing that would take that money away from you because of your actions that are dangerous. So the level of accountability from a policy standpoint is hugely wanting at the state level. But instead of focusing on, I love policy and I got a master's in policy, but instead of focusing on that, I think I wanna just zero in from a different angle and say, we need to bring on greater economic prosperity for Black people. We need more Black people in leadership. And behavior change is hard. That's why it doesn't happen easily. It doesn't happen quickly. Our brains are trained to do things the same way over and over again. And we are operating based on schema that we have around any individual thing. To introduce new schema, it's hard to do it as an individual. You have to continually have repeated behaviors that have new schema that override existing schema. The most efficient way to introduce new schema is introduce new people, because Black people will bring a different schema, and that schema will dictate different behaviors that will lead to different outcomes. And I really like the Sunday New York Times. They had, but their New York Times newspaper, I actually think it came out on Thursday, they talked about people in leadership. How many Black people nationally are in leadership? And there were things like 99 owners of sports teams. Only 6 were people of color. I think there was only 1 that was Black. You know how many people of color are on sports teams? And that's just one indicator. And the list went on and on. Out of the Supreme Court, our United States Supreme Court, and the 9 justices, they said since 1789, all but six since 1789 had been white men. This is a problem. So as I was reading this, I just thought, oh my gosh, we have only had 1 Black governor of any state in this nation. Or 2 Black governors since the history of this country. So until we begin to change the leadership of our business and civic and all the institutions, we are not going to see the change that we need to see in behavior. And I want to remind people, Blackness is a diverse group. There are Black Latinx people. There are Black Indigenous people. Like, Black people are diverse. And I think sometimes we also have a very narrow view of who Black people are. And so we need to have more Black people in leadership if we are going to see a change in the economic conditions of Black people. I believe that firmly. And I also believe all the other policy changes necessary.
Very, very well said. Michelle, do you have any thoughts to add?
What can I add after all my colleagues have poured their intellect and passion into this question? As you can see, it's a very real one for us. I think I would just, again, lift up, who I represent, who I'm a part of. Obviously, I walk in a room, I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman. I have other identities that are related to me that people actually don't see, but I bring them all into the room. And so I bring them all into the room at an institution that straddles our civic sector, straddles our nonprofit sector, and straddles our business sector. And to just make a touch on what Kali was bringing up so eloquently, if you look at Myers' chair of our board is Toya Fick, a identified Black woman. Myers' CEO is Michelle J. DePass, an identified Black woman. Myers' CIO is Rakaya Adams, an identified Black woman. So I would like to hold us out as an example of change can actually occur, as long as you put your hearts and minds in action to that occurrence. So we absolutely have to have a foundational space where we have data. And I agree, yes, we have to work on policy. But what we are really talking about, aside from disaggregation of data and policy, is changing hearts and minds. And this panel, I think, was ideated as an opportunity for us to have a discussion about what's possible and to reimagine. And we also very much have to think about the culture, what has been able to be comfortable in how we live. We pat ourselves a lot on the back about being a liberal state, a space where we acknowledge differences, but in the reality and foundationally, we really have to think about how we look at each other, the attitudes that we use toward each other, and what we actually have in our DNA and how we can change that.
Wonderful. I have one more question, and I'm going to ask Mari to speak to it first. And if any of the other panelists would like to add on to, share more comments to that, we're welcome to. But just a reminder, do a time check. If we can get a few questions after this from the question and answer chat function, we'll get to those. But Mari, this summer, Partners in Diversity released the latest findings on a workforce retention report. Speaking to this report, what are 2 or 3 things employers in our region should be doing immediately to improve the retention of Black employees and all employees of color?
Thanks, JR. Yes, so we spent the last year doing research work based on a grant from Oregon Community Foundation and Portland General Electric. We were able to actually answer a question that has a lot of employers asking us all the time, partners in diversity. It's like, how do we better retain our employees of color? So they spend a lot of money, go out and search for people of color, bring them here, and then they stay a couple of years and then they leave. And so anecdotally, we could totally have made the list, but without true research, it's harder to make change and to put policies in place. So we we spent the last year doing this, and I think some of the results, the results alone are very sobering, but if now, after COVID and the murder of George Floyd, et cetera, I think these percentages would be even worse. So, so we spent the year interviewing professionals of color who actually moved here and moved away, and some that actually moved here and stayed in our community. And some of the statistics I want to share, these are all on our website, so I'm just going to mention a couple. But 74% of these interviewees reported some form of discrimination in their workplace. Only 17% of them felt their organization was being supportive of them as a person of color. 9% felt their organizations put time or money into diversity initiatives, so not very much. And then 1% of these newcomers felt they were included in the community. So that inability to find their community or feel a part of a place that they call home was almost nil. And so community is oftentimes where we find support and where we can add, where we can actually feel like we want to stay and live here. So again, these statistics are not very good, but in speaking to what employers can do to help retain their employees of color, so once we found out all this research information, we put together a pretty broad group of employers to help us create solutions that employers can implement in their own organizations. And some of these were suggestions from the interviewees themselves on if this had happened, maybe I would have stayed. So the result was a 32 solutions, which you can find on our website. And by far, this is not an infinite list, and it's not a step 1, step 2, step 3. A lot of these solutions should be done all at the same time. But we bucketed the solutions into 4 major categories. And the first and most important bucket is accountability for our leaders. So as others have mentioned on our panel, accountability of leadership is really the number one thing. If you don't have that buy-in or that desire to make change within your own organization, this work won't work. And also to get more leaders of color into those is a proven research fact that companies will do better. So one of the solutions was having leaders compensation tied to their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Another big bucket was employer policies and practices, where employers need to review and reevaluate their own internal policies and practices, and a lot of them are steeped in our white supremacist history of bias and inequity. So definitely to take time to walk through those. The third one is community support and networking. Oh, and I also mentioned before, you're really reinvesting in your employees of color. The third one, community support and networking. So leverage existing community-based organizations and programs to support these newly arrived professionals of color. And then the fourth one, individual support and advocacy. So being the only or one of the few in a workplace is really challenging. There's not a lot of people you can talk to. There's a lot of people who look like you, so you can't share the issues and stress that go, especially at a time like this. So really focusing on ways to promote health and wellness of your employees of color. So again, these are all found on our website.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mari. Yeah, you can find that report and all those details on the website for Partners in Diversity. I want to invite Callie to share with you, and then we're going to bring Andrew back up.
Just one quick thing I want, because there are employers on this call, I just would encourage every employer to ask the question as it pertains to diversity, what their opportunity ratio is. How many opportunities did you have to bring a Black person into a key leadership position, and how many times did you do it? One is the numerator, the other is the denominator. If you have not had the opportunity, what is your pipeline? Change the pipeline. If you haven't done it, what are the barriers to doing it? Like, every employer should be looking at what their opportunity ratio is so that they are increasing Black people in key positions. That is all.
If I could jump in.
Yes, please.
It is a question for boards, and I want to highlight that space in terms of the accountability to be able to actually change the face of worker leadership in the state.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. 2 hands up, as our local tribes would have do in this area. I want to invite Andrew back on up to ask some questions on behalf of the audience. Andrew?
Thank you so much, JR. I think there's actually been a great number of questions here, but we're nearly at time. But I want to go in order. We did receive one question. I think it's very apropos for you, JR, actually, to put you a little bit on the spot as our moderator. But I really appreciated this from Katie Larsell of the East Portland Action Plan, who asked, East Portland is the most diverse part of Portland, and the East Portland Action Plan is advocating for an anti-racism equity plan for East Portland. What would you think of the city tackling such a plan? And what would you like to see change in East Portland? This one's to you, JR.
I'm a member of the East Portland Action Plan, very for this, would love to see all the things that was mentioned today, and how can we specifically call out these communities, immigrant refugee communities, the BIPOC communities, and have some measurable goals in which we as a community can come together and acknowledge them and bring them forward along with us. But I definitely want to hear what the other panelists have to share.
Can you repeat the question, Andrew, just as an East Portland business? I just want to make sure.
Sure thing. The question, East Portland is the most diverse part of Portland, and the East Portland Action Plan is advocating for an anti-racism equity plan for East Portland. What would you think of the city tackling such a plan, and what would you like to see change in East Portland?
Oh, perfect. Jobs, economic development, innovation, sustainability. I mean, right now, since it's a heavily concentrated area of underserved, poverty, just very challenged circumstances, how do you create a multi-tiered approach to really doing an economic development strategy plan for this portion of the region while not displacing anybody is going to be key. And to be honest, I mean, this should be a very major front topic of conversation for anybody who's running for the city of Portland mayor right now. And the fact that it's not, and I understand it's not because there's so many other challenges, but again, challenges are always going to be there. The question is who's focusing on our future? And when we find the right leader that focuses on our future, that is talking about our future and the direction that we're going as it pertains to our economy, I think everything else kind of falls in line. But we can never have an economic development strategy without putting human capital and equity at the front of it.
I think that's a great way to segue to gratitude to our panelists, and wishing that we had an extended period of time to continue this conversation. And I think we all need to. This isn't just a one-time only thing, but we need to reconvene. We need to make sure that this dialogue continues and turns into action. So I want to reiterate thanks to our moderator, to JR, Lily, as well as all of these incredible panelists, and absolutely, and to all those who were in attendance today, who joined us to listen in and to engage. There were a number of questions that were in the question and answer. I will make sure that our team distributes that to our panelists as well as to the team here at the Alliance, and we'll try and get back to everybody who asked those questions as a follow-up, and a reminder that this will be posted to our website. So once again, thank you for all of those who joined us today. The panelists, you were incredible, and I want to encourage all attendees to join us again next month, same time. And we'll be discussing the future of the workplace and how it looks in a post-COVID world. So should be an interesting conversation. We hope you can join us. And once again, for everyone, please stay healthy and stay safe out there, and take care of yourselves, your families, and your colleagues. Our best wishes, and thanks again, and have a great day.